Okay, there's I posted a Slack about the lab task. Can everyone see it? So it's again another Google form link. If you click on it, you'll see instructions like before. There should be a folder file, and once you click on the folder file, you'll see something like this. This is where all your tasks are. So let's go through them one by one. The first step is to write a Python program using for or while loop that can print the numbers that are divisible by 5 between 1 to 51. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
So, how can we come up with a solution for this? From 1 to 55, that's a lot of numbers. If we try to manually print all of them, that's not going to be a very efficient solution. We're trying to be programmers here, and we will try to utilize all kind of programming concepts. So for a problem like this, a for loop or a while loop might come very handy for us. First, let's see an example of how for loops work. Let's say for x is range 10. What this is going to do is what I'm saying is for x is a name of a variable. So what I wrote here is for x is the name of a variable. You can pick any name you want. And then I wrote in range, and in the range function, again, whenever you see two opening brackets after a word, that's the function. We saw the input function, we saw the print function, so the range is another function. So what happens when I put a number inside the range function? Let's find out. So what I'm doing in this code is in the for loop, I'm just printing the value of x. X is a variable that I declared within the for loop, and I'm saying for range 10, just print x. Let's see what happens here. So my output is from 0 to all the way to 9. So let's try to understand what's happening. In the range function, I gave 10. And from 0 to 9, these are 10 numbers. Right? 1 minus 0 is 1, 2 minus 1 is 1. So the difference is, what happens if I try to, let's say, it's going to start from 0 again, and this will go all the way to 14. So when I put a number in the range function, it starts from 0 and it ends with the number previous to that. In total, there are 14 numbers. I'm sorry, in total there are 15 numbers from 0 to 14. Does that make sense? What happens when I put a number in the range function? Now, we will have to work with numbers from 1 to 51. So what happens if I put 51 in the range function? What will happen is it will start from 0 and end with 50. However, that is not the range we are looking for. We're looking for from 1 to 51. We don't want to start from 0. So the range function can take multiple inputs. If I if I don't specify which number to start from, it will always start from 0. But if I specify which number I want to start from and then put how many numbers I want to go, it's going to look something like this. So there should be two attributes, one for one for the starting number, and the second for how many numbers you want to go after that. So let's verify this with a smaller number first. So what will happen here? It will start from 1 and it will go to 9. So whatever I put as the second parameter after the previous value, I would have to put 1 comma 16 here. So 158. This should be my output. So there we go. 1 to 15 all the way. Now, so we can see an advantage of how we can utilize loops. If we say that we have to print numbers from 1 to 100, we don't want to write the print statement 100 times, saying print 1, print 2, print 3. That's going to take forever. Rather, we can use a loop like this and set the range and just write 2 lines of code and it will work the same. So that's why loops are very important in programming. Oftentimes we will have to use loops to solve different kinds of problems. So right now let's try and solve this problem. We have to work with the numbers from 1 to 51. From 1 to 51, our range should be 52. That means we're referring from 1 to 52. So that is 1 to 51. However, that's not all we have to do. We have to find if print the numbers that are divisible by 5. Do we remember in the previous lab we did something like this? We need an if statement to make any kind of decision. So if I only print 1 to 50 if function and a for loop and say 1 comma 52, divisible by 5. So it should print 10, 15, 20, and so on, all the way to 50. How can we achieve? we can go for an if function like check if the number x is divisible by 5. If so, if this condition is satisfied, only then print, and if not, then print it. Do you understand the idea?
So we're going to use
If you have any
mod
questions, you
for
can
that.
ask. Yes, we're going to use the mod operator. 5 mod, sorry, x mod 5. X is the variable I'm working with, all the numbers that are in the loop. So if it's equal to 0, then we should print. Make sure the indentation is correct. We want this print to be within the if function. So I'll put a tab right before the print statement. So again, let's try and go through the code. First, I'm declaring a for loop and a variable called x, and I'm setting the range because I'm supposed to find the numbers between this range. And then I'm checking with an if statement if the number is divisible by 5. If so, then I'm only printing it. That way, I will not have to print all the numbers from 1 to 51, rather only the numbers that are divisible by 5. If the number is not divisible by 5, I'm not doing anything, so it will continue the loop. It will start from 1, it will check if the number is divisible by 5. No, then it will go and increase the number again. So it will be 2 next time, and so on, and 3, 4, until it finds 5. It will be divisible by 5, and it will print 5, like this. So let's run the loop and verify if our code works. So we see that it starts from 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and all the way to 50. So this is the correct output that we were looking for. So this is your solution to the first task. Any questions? Again, I would suggest you to watch the lab lecture videos before actually doing the tests yourselves. The instructors talked much more detail for the loops, both while and for. So if you want to know more about while loops and for loops and how exactly they work, I would suggest to watch the lab lectures. Okay, moving on to the second task. Write a Python program using for loop that can print the sum of odd numbers between 1 to 30. 1 to 30. Okay, in the previous task, we were given a choice. We could have used a for loop or we could have used a while loop. But in the second task, it's saying that we have to use a for loop. Now, the first task can also be solved using a while loop. Do you want me to show you that solution as well? Or do you want to try it yourselves?
So can you repeat the question?
Okay, in the first task, it's saying that you can solve this problem using a while loop or a for loop. It's up to you. The choice is given to use any kind of loops, while or for. So I showed you the solution while using a for loop. You can also solve this problem using a while loop instead of a for loop. There are two kinds of loops in Python, while and for.
Yeah.
So I showed you using a for loop. You can also solve this problem using a while loop. So do you want me to show you that as well, or do you want to try it yourselves?
So I think so like trying ourselves will be better.
Okay. So moving on to test two. So we have to print the sum of odd numbers between 11 and 30. What does that mean? Well, let's try to let's try to find out all the odd numbers from 11 to 30. The first odd number will be 11 itself. The second odd number should be 13. The third odd number should be 15. So what does the sum of odd numbers mean? The first line I have to print um, whatever the sum so far is, which is just 11. On the second line, I should, when I have two odd numbers, 11 and 13, I have to add them up. So 11 plus 13 is 24. So I have to keep 24 somewhere. And when I have another odd number, 11, 13, and 15, I have to add all three of them. So it should be 11 plus 13 plus 15, which will give you 39. And all the way, we have to do this for up to 30. So the last number should be 29. So the last value is going to be 11 plus 13 plus 15 plus 17 plus 19 all the way to 29. All the odd numbers. Is the problem clear? What we have to do?
Yes, sir.
Don't worry
Yes.
if you can't think of a solution. We can figure it out together. They're saying that we have to use for loop. So again, let's set the range just like the previous one. We want to start from 11 to 30. So what should be our range values? We want to start from 11, comma. If you want to end at 30, we should put 31 here. Just to verify if we are taking the correct range, let's first print the values. So 11 to 30. Now, if we want to find an odd number, we can go for the approach we learned. If x, hold on, so I'm just trying to find. So if x, do you remember how we can check if a number is odd or even?
So divided by 2 if equals to 0.
Uh, do I have to divide it or use mod to find the remainder?
So mod 2 equal to 0.
Yes. Okay. So if it's mod 2 equals 0, that means this would be an even number. However, we're trying numbers. So what we can do is not equal to 0. Now we see that we only print the odd numbers. So if you do remember, the equal symbols mean that we're trying to check if the both sides are equal, this side and this side. And if we want to check if it's not equal, we use this symbol. The exclamation mark in programming is considered as not in many cases. So this means that not equal to. So it's exactly the opposite of equal. All right. So when we run this code, we see that we only have the even number. Sorry, the odd numbers: 11, 13, 15, so on, all the way to 29. But our task wasn't just to print. We have to actually calculate the sum each time. Now, how can we do that? The problem with using loops is we are losing the previous values. When x is 11, it will print 11, but then it will be update it to 13. We don't have 11 anymore. Then it will be updated to 15 and all the way to 29. So the problem is we can't store the value somewhere when we're using a loop. So do you have any idea how we can store a value? What have we been using so far to store any kind of values? We use variables, right? So we can take another variable. Let's call it sum because we want to store all the
Oh,
sums, and we can initialize the value of the sum with 0 because initially our sum is 0. So once we get an odd number, we want to add it to the sum. My sum should equal to x. However, only making it equal to x will not give us the right answer because on the next iteration, this will become 13 and 15. So we're going to lose the previous value again. But where can we keep the previous value? Within the sum variable. Now this might be a bit confusing to you as you're seeing this for the first time. What is um, because in mathematics this makes absolutely no sense. Sum equals to x plus sum, that means x should be 0, or so sum should equal to sum. But in programming, always remember the single equation operator means that you're assigning a value. You're not saying that this equals to this. When you're trying to say that the left side equals to right side, we use uh, double equation symbols. So we're assigning the calculation here to the variable sum. So let's see what happens. In the first iteration, x will be 11, and my sum would be 0. So when you're trying to assign a value to any kind of variable, first you have to look at the right side, calculate the value, then put it on the left side or in the variable. So x plus sum, that would mean 11 in the first iteration. You see it right here. And my sum is 0. Is 11. And after the first iteration, it will become, my x will become 13. So in that case, it should be 13 plus, what was my sum? It was 11 in the previous, according to the previous iteration. So it is going to be 13 plus 11. So I'm going to get something like 24. And what I'm doing is I'm storing 24 within the sum variable again. And the next time x is going to be 15 and it's going to add it with 24. And I'm going to get 39. 24 plus 15 equals 39. So this way I am able to save the variable, save the summation. Save, this is how I can keep track of how many numbers I'm adding. So the only remaining thing to do is instead of printing x, I should print sum because that's where I'm keeping all the additions for odd numbers. Now if I run the code, you see I get the exact values. Now this is a problem where you can actually understand why loops are so important. If you try to do this manually, it's going to take you hours. However, if you come up with the logic and write like five lines of code, you're done. And this is for a very small range. If you were to do this for from 11 to 300, it will take you all day. But if you're trying to do this with using a for loop, you can simply change the range and then print. It's going to take a lot of space, but just to show you that how useful loops can be, and it doesn't even take much time because the computer is pretty fast at calculating. So we get all the numbers.
So, if we wanted to make a
Yes,
program for like the even number sum, so we just have to make it x mod equal to 0.
exactly. Yeah. Let's try and verify that. So you get 12. 12 plus 14 is 26. 26 plus 16 is 42. So that's how it's going. So yeah, if we change the condition within the if to equal, we'll get the summation of all the even numbers. And this is for the odd numbers. So any questions regarding test 2 or any confusions? Any line you are still not uh, completely understanding? Now,
No, sir.
some common mistakes for for beginners in programming is they will forget to initialize the sum value. They will try to write it like this and assume that sum will contain zero, but you will get an error for this because you're not saying what sum is. Your program is going to get confused. So always remember you have to initialize a value before the loop. So when it actually comes to calculating the sum, it knows that it had a previous value. If you don't initialize or say that you took a variable named sum, when it reaches this line, it's going to get confused. X plus sum is going to look at the right side first, and it's going to get confused what sum is. So that's why keep in mind to initialize the value before the loop. If you initialize the value within the loop, let's say if you say sum equals 0 here, it's not going to give you an error, but you will not be able to keep track of all the values like this because what a loop does is it runs over and over again. So the problem with this approach would be that when x is 11, sum will be 0, and then when you're trying to calculate the sum, it's going to be 11 plus 0, which is fine for the first iteration, and it's going to print 11. However, on the next turn, x is going to be 13, and sum will be 0 again. So you're losing the previous value. You're initializing it over and over again with 0. So in this case, we won't reach our desired output. So the reason why I initialize the value of sum before the loop is so we can keep the values. So anyway, I'm sure with a bit more practice, you'll get a clearer picture about how to use loops and how to keep the values. All right, so this is the solution for task 2. Let's move on to task 3. Write a Python program using while or for loop that reads 10 numbers from the user and print the average. So can we do this one on our own? Okay, I'll also do this one since we're taking inputs and you might be a bit confused exactly where we have to take inputs. So should I go for a for loop or a while loop? You have the option to choose any kind of loop, while or for. So I'll ask you guys, whichever you want me to solve it with, I'll
So
solve it
for
with that.
loop.
Okay. But keep in mind, in some tasks, you will have to use a while loop. So you have to be familiar with both. For example, in the next task, you have to use a while loop. So since you want me to solve it with a for loop again, I'll do it. Okay, so Anika is saying that if I can do it with a while loop. I think I'll go with Anika's request for this time because I showed a few examples of for loop, but I haven't showed any examples for a while loop. So just to get you guys a bit more familiar with both the loops, let's do this using a while loop. So what do we have to do? We have to take 10 numbers from the user and print their average. So first, let's concentrate on taking 10 numbers. So the first thing we have to do is run our loops and make sure it runs 10 times. So if we were to do, if we want to run for loop for 10 times, we would have to write for x in, again, x is a variable name. You can put any kind of anything, any variable name within in instead of x, and use the range function, right? And if I put 10 here, I can be sure that this loop will run 10 times. However, it's not that simple in a while loop. What we have to do in a while loop is while and then put a condition like if. While that condition is satisfied, the loop will keep running. So before we want to put a condition, we should start with a variable. Let's say I'm using a variable called count. The value of this variable is to keep count of how many. So let's say my counter starts with 1. If while my counter is less or equal to 1. This is a very similar condition what we use in C like x mod mod equal to 0. So this just like the if function, the while condition will return true or false. Initially, my counter is 1, so 1 is less or equal to 1. So this will be true, and it will enter my loop. To verify, let's print counter first. And another thing that is very important is that you have to make increase your count or the variable that you're taking to check the condition within the while loop. Because if now, sorry, if, if I run my code now, I am not increasing my counter. My counter is staying the same. However, I'm not updating the value of counter anywhere within my code, and as a result, the counter will remain 1, and this condition will keep satisfying. So that's the thing we have to be careful when using loops, that we can end up with infinite loops, and that can hamper the performance uh, as well as we not coming up with the right outcome. So the important part is we have to increase the counter. So counter equals to the previous value of counter plus 1. Now, how can we get that? We saw an example within this particular line, how we can update a certain value. So again, a single equal symbol will represent an assignation. That means I'm going to assign a value within the counter. So if I write something like this, counter plus 1, what does that mean? That means first I'm going to look at the right side. My counter is 1, so 1 plus 1 equals to 2, and I'm putting that value 2 within the counter variable. So currently my counter is 2, and next time it's going to check if 2 is less or equal to 10. So that's yes again, and it will print 2, and then my counter will be, the value of my counter will be 2, and 2 plus 1 will equal to 3. And I'm storing 3 within the counter variable again. Now, if doing this in one line does not make sense to you, you can, let's say, you can take a temp variable and then put counter equals to 10. Should make sense to you because initially counter should start with 1. So 1 plus 1 equals 2. So my temp variable contains 2. And on the next line, what I'm doing is I'm taking the value of temp and putting it in my counter variable. So this is also correct. You can choose either approach you want. You can do it in a single line or you can break it down, whatever makes sense to you. So now if I run my program, what should it print? It should print from 1 to 10. So this is an example of using a while loop. While in a for loop, we could set the range. In a while loop, we have to set a condition. While this condition is satisfied, the loop will continue to run. Are we clear about while loops, how they work, and why it's important to increase the number? Okay, so let's go back to the task, how we can do it. We have to take 10 numbers. We made sure that our loop runs 10 times. So whatever we write within the loop should should run 10 times. That's what we're sure of so far. So what it's saying is we need to read 10 numbers from the user and print their average. So how can we take numbers from the user? Which function should we use?
The input.
Yes, we need to use the input function. So instead of printing here, let's use the input function. Let's call it user input. We have to store it in a variable, right? So I'll name it user input, input function, enter a number, please. Number. So what this means is instead of writing this 10 times, if I put it in a loop, it will take 10 inputs. If I make this 100, it will take 100 inputs. I don't have to write the line 100 times. That's the power of loops. We simply set a condition or a range, and it runs that many times. Now we have to calculate the average. So we first need to calculate the sum and then divide it by 10, since we're taking 10 numbers. Now, since we're doing mathematical operations, again, an input function will only return a string. We would have to convert that to an integer or a float. So since we will be using these values to calculate the average, and that can be a floating point number, like in the sample output. It would be wiser if we take float instead of an integer. All right. So far we took the user input, but how can we calculate the sum? Because we need the sum to calculate the average later on. So again, we can declare another variable before the loop. sum equals 0. And after taking the user input, we can say sum equals user input plus sum. Just like in this task, we're updating the value of sum. Again, if you're not comfortable with using one line, you can use, let's say, temp sum, and then update the value like this. Both are correct. Whichever makes more sense to you, you should go with that. All right. So when we're done calculating the sum, when are we done calculating the sum? After the loop, because the loop will run 10 times. And then finally, when we're done taking 10 numbers, it will be done calculating the sum. So after the loop, we can calculate the average. After the loop, we can ensure that we have the sum. Then if we want to calculate the average, simply we have to divide the sum with 10, since we're taking 10 numbers. Does that make sense? So if we run it, let's try with the sample input. First number is 5, second number is 8, that's 13, 5, 4, 2, 7, 7, 8, 10. So we get the value 12.3, which is this one right here. Now we should always try to follow the exact output format. So we should also print this the string before the number. So can we do that on our own? In case you forgot how to do it, it's simply like this. And you can just copy the whole thing if you want. So that's it. That's your solution for task 3. You can keep using temporary variables if you're not comfortable with how the assignation operation works, or you can use this in one line like this and forget about this and simply do this as well. So go for it. Okay, so for the ones who are joining in a bit late, we are pretty much done with task 3. We showed examples for loops and while loops. But don't worry, we have this whole thing recorded. I would suggest you to finish the class first, and after that, I'll be providing you with the recording. So you can watch that later on. So for task 4, any questions regarding task 3? Okay, so task 4. Write a Python program using while loop. So this time we don't have a choice. We have to use a while loop that prints all the numbers from 1 to 30 that are divisible by 3 or more. So I just showed you an example of while loop. I'm hoping you guys can do this on your own. You would have to set the range. So how can we set the range in a while loop? We have to take a variable. You can name it anything you want. In my case, I named it counter. So from 1 to 30. So I would have to check if it's less or equal to 30. Or you can check if it's less than 31. You want to stay consistent for while loop and for loop while determining the range from 1 to 31. If it's less than 31 or if it's less or equal to 30, both conditions will be valid. Then we have to use an if within the while loop to check if it's divisible by 3 or if it's divisible by 5. You can use multiple ifs to check both conditions, or you can use a single if and use multiple conditions within a single if. For example, let's say I'm taking a variable called temp and I'm typing a number of 15. Now, if I want to check if it's divisible by 3 or 5, 15 is actually divisible by both. So 12 is only divisible by 3, not divisible by 5. But it says or. So even if it's only divisible by 3, it should still work for us. I'm just showing you how we can use multiple conditions within a if statement. I'm not going to give you the entire solution. In an entire solution, you would have to use a while loop. So if, let's say, temp, how can we check if it's, first let's try to do it for 1. We're trying to check if it's divisible by 3. Um, yes, we can use the and keyword. But in this case, we would have to use the or keyword. But just to show everyone how it works, first we have to check if it's divisible by 3. So the mod 3 equal to 0. If this is true, it will enter the if. However, we want to check two conditions this time. If we want to check two conditions, we have to use the and or the and keyword like this and write another condition, or the or keyword like this. In this case, we're trying to figure out if is divisible with 3 or 5. So simply we have to use the or function or the or keyword and make sure on the right side we have divisible by 5. Then. So 12 is going to work, and even in the sample output, you see 12 is available here. So 12 should work, and also 15 should work, 20 should work. While 12 is only divisible by 3, it's not divisible by 5. So since we're checking if it's divisible by either one or both, that's what the OR operator means. Either divisible by 3 or divisible by 5 or both. All, all three are acceptable. So 12 is divisible by 3, that's why it's acceptable. 15 is divisible by both, that's why it's acceptable. 20 is divisible by 5, that's why it's acceptable. So in this case, we should print 12. However, let's say for 11, something like this. It's not going to print anything. It's blank. So this is how you can use a single if statement and use multiple conditions within single if statement. So this is not the entire solution. You'll have to use a while loop and then check the condition. So I'll leave that for up to you. And for task 5, write a Python program using for loop that reads from the user and prints the multiplication table of the number up to 10. All right, so what this task is saying that it should take an input from the user and it should print the multiplication table. So 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 8, 2 times 4 is 8, and all the way to 2 times 10 is 20. So whatever the user can input anything. You don't have to write the multiplication table for it to use. So at first you have to take a user input and then uh, write the multiplication table. And this time you are supposed to use a for loop.
So let's take an user input first. User input. You can take an int. Since we're not dividing anything, we're not going to get fractions. You can take a float as well. Both are correct. So input is enter a number, and now we have to use a for loop. For x in range. Now, what do we need within the for loop? 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So if we can write the for loop in a way that can give us the numbers from 1 to 10, and within that for loop, if we can multiply the user input with all the numbers from 1 to 10, then we can pretty much have our multiplication table. Do you understand the idea? So the problem is, the main challenge to this problem is we just have to create a for loop that ranges from 1 to 10. We can simply uh, find the multiplication table for any. So how can we make sure it runs from 1 to 10? If we put 10 in the range and print, what's going to happen? Do we remember what's going to happen? Okay, first let's give it a number. It doesn't matter. It's going to go from 0 to 9. While it has 10 digits, it has 10 numbers. It will start from 0 if you don't specify which number to start from. Now, starting from 0 is not what we want. We want to start from 1 and we want to go to 10. So we need um, two parameters for the range function. We have to start from 1. The first parameter stands for start from where, and the second parameter is up to when. So if we say 1 comma 10, that will give us from 1 to 9. So we should give 1 comma 11. That way it's going to print 1 to 10. 1 to 10. So far, we're not even working with the user input. We are making sure that we are able to take the numbers from 1 to 10. Because now, all we have to do is multiply each of the numbers within the loop with the user input. So 4 times 1 should be 4, 4 times 2 should be 8, 4 times 3 should be 12. So that way we can get the multiplication table. So instead of printing just x here, all we have to do is user input times x. So when I run the loop this time, it's going to print 4 times 1, 4 times 2, 4 times 3, all the way to 4 times 10. And we'll have our multiplication table. So let's verify this. If we give the user input as 2, see, we get all the values. 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6, and all the way to 2 times 10 is 20. You can try this for other values. Let's say you're trying to figure out a multiplication table for a big number like 78. So there you go. Do you understand this problem and the solution? So if you don't have questions now, you can try practicing it yourselves. If you do face any issues while practicing, you can always reach us in Slack. All right, so we are done with task 5, and there's one task left, and it's a pretty simple task. It's saying that write a Python program using a while loop that reads a number and the text from the user. So it will take two inputs. The first one will be a number. So make sure to use the input function and use an int like this to take the number, and then it will take a string. So then you won't have to convert it into an int. A simple input function would be enough. So you have to take two variables and keep the two user inputs in those two variables. And then the program should print the text as many times as the number. So this is the text. Bingo, last CSE101 lab assignment is done. And this is the number. So the text should be printed uh, four times in this case because the number is four. If the user input, let's say 100, this and prints something other than this, let's say done with CSE101, something like that. So done with CSE101 should print 100 times. These are sample inputs. Don't try to print this exact output because you can simply write print this four times and you're done. So that's not what we're trying to get from you. The user will input a number and a string or a text. So you would have to print that text the amount of times of the number that the user input. Is the question clear? Anyone having trouble understanding what that six tells us to do? In this case, if the sample input was 6 and this text, the output should be 6 times instead of 4. If this was 100, the output should be 100 times. And if the text was different, you would have to print that text as many times as the number given by the user. That, that's what the question is telling you. So I want you to do this on your own. This isn't very difficult. If you understand how while loops work, it should be very simple for you. So I think we're done here, and this is probably our last lab. In Slack, I submission is a week. So next 16th, you'll have to submit it before within 16. So don't be sad, Salah. If you want to learn more about there are different courses that will help you out.
So how can I reach you if I need any kind of like help or something regarding programming? So throughout email.
And there you should have the file that I was working on. So remember to copy it first within your drive. The instructions are given in the Google form. So just in case you forget, I'm reminding you to make sure to copy the file first in your drive and then work on it. Not this one. So as you see, I didn't copy anything, and it says that cannot save changes. So all I did is going to be gone. It's going to be lost. So don't make this mistake. Make sure to copy it first. Copy it first, and then work on the file that is within your drive.
So I don't think the file is gone. Maybe.
You're going to actually, if you're going to refresh, I think. Well, if I close it, it's going to say that it's not saved. And if
So
I leave,
if
it
you
will be off.
so
Yeah.
if you close the Google Chrome, then so if you
Mhm.
again write down Google Colab, the first page will show the list of the thing. Like it happens with my case. Like there are some programs that I don't even save or anything. I just type run and then I just close Chrome. But when I again enter like Google Colab, the first page, then it
Yeah.
shows a list that these are my previous programs unsaved.
Hmm. So yeah, it's in many cases it tries to keep a temporary file so that um, for example, when I refresh the page, it's all gone. So in many cases, if you didn't close this tab but closed the entire Chrome and opened it again, in many cases it might stay. It uses something called cache memory to store unsaved files temporarily. However, I would never recommend you to depend on that. I would always recommend you to save a copy in your drive just to make sure, because um, cache memory it gets cleared out uh, many times by itself sometimes, and it's not wise to depend on that.
So I
For
have a
example,
question
yeah,
regarding the previous assignments I have submitted.
yeah, go on.
So like also there on the previous assignments, there are several things that I did in another way, or like sir, wrote things in another way. So will that be a problem?
No, as long
So
as you
for
have the
so
right
for
output.
example,
Yeah.
so in the triangle, so we usually write one and a half uh, or half, but so I wrote down like 0.5
That's
area
perfectly
into
fine.
0. Point,
It's the same thing. No, no problem with that.
okay.
All right. Any other questions? Again, for those of you who came in a bit late, I would suggest you to watch the recording when the recording is ready. I'll be posting it in Slack. So go through it once. I'm pretty sure the tasks shouldn't be that difficult. I pretty much did most of them for you. I left a few for you to try. And even if you do face any issues while trying them, you can always reach us in Slack, or you can email us, whichever is comfortable for you. All right. Any last questions? Madhuti, did I forget anything? Do you want to add anything else?
No, sir. Some of you were asking about the lab marks. When will we show it? So we'll show it after you are done with submitting the lab 6 assignment. So then we'll just share your marks in Slack or through a live session or whatever. Then you, if you think that you have any issues with your marks, you can let us know after that. Okay?
So we won't be having any kind of exam
No, we
Uh,
won't.
on lab.
no. The lab tests are, we will give you your marks based on the lab tests, the submissions. Okay. Any last questions? Or I think I'll end it here. Okay. So this might be the last time we're having a class. So thank you guys for coming. It's been a journey. It's been a great journey. I hope you guys enjoyed programming. This is the first time we have taught programming in CSE 101. And we could feel that for many of you, it was a bit difficult to grasp, and it should be. You guys are not CS students. You probably never have any kind of programming experience. However, I saw that some of you are very interested in programming. That made us a bit more encouraged to teach you guys. And programming is pretty useful knowledge since everything is. oriented regarding computer science these days, having knowledge regarding programming can be very beneficial for you in the future. So thinking of those things, we decided to go with programming for the first time. And it's important to get your feedback as well. If you feel like that we are going a bit too fast, or we're teaching too many things in a very short time, you can always give your feedback to us, because your feedback will help us shape the course for future students. So an honest feedback is very much appreciated. Um, and so that's pretty much it. That's it for CSE 101. I hope you enjoyed Python, the little bit we taught you so far. And if you're interested, you can still follow along with many online tutorials and Pythons. And you can simply Google things like Learn Python Online, or even there are a lot of YouTube videos showing you more tips on how to properly learn Python. We showed you pretty basic stuff. We showed you how to take user inputs, how to calculate values, how to use if-else statements, how to use conditions, how to use loops. These are all fundamental things for any kind of programming language. If you want, and this should be your base. You should, if you want to properly learn a programming language, these are the concepts you have to understand first. And based on that, you can build your complete programming language experience. So you can, if you want to learn, all I'm saying is if you want to learn more, there are a lot of online resources available. And if you feel like you're stuck somewhere, even after the course, you can maybe email us or try to reach us. And if we're free, we'll be happy to help you out.
আমি কিছু বলতে চাই।
Yeah, of course.
প্রথমে আমি খুব ভয় পাইছিলাম যে প্রোগ্রামিং কখনো করি নাই, জানি না কিভাবে করতে হয়, জানিও না কিভাবে লিখে। তারপর যখন করা শুরু করলাম, তারপর এখন মানে ভালো লাগছে যে আমি কিছু একটা পারছি। আর এটা এত মানে ডিফিকাল্ট, বাট স্টিল ইট ওয়াজ ফান টু লার্ন নিউ থিং।
Yeah, that's a great observation. That's the thing for most common people, that they are very afraid of programming, thinking that it's not for them or it's way too complicated. But once you start, once you take that first step, it's not that difficult. And especially for a language like Python, it's pretty much like English. You're writing a story or something. You're saying that user input, if the user input is this, then go for this. While this is valid, go for this. It's pretty much like a story writing in English.
So it's mostly about understanding the functions.
Yes, it's mostly about how understanding how it works and the logic. So that's pretty much what computer science is, or programming is based on logic. And the thing about programming is, if you try to, if you think that memorizing code will get you somewhere, it won't. What's important is you have to understand the logic, and in any kind of problem, the thing you have to, the main challenge is try to figure out a logic to solve the problem. And the syntax is the second part of it. But the main challenge is to figure out a logic. And that's why programmers really need to think before they act. So the more you code, the more smarter you get. It's kind of like that. Because coding helps you to understand logic, to build logic. And that's why Steve Jobs said that everyone should learn programming just so they can think better. All right. On that note, I think I'll end it here. Thank you guys for coming. You've been very, very wonderful students, and I've enjoyed taking classes for you guys. And this is our last official lab. So next week we probably won't have a lab, but in case we want to share all the marks, and you guys want to ask us questions, or you guys are confused about the marks you have or you have been given to, then we might hold a live session at the very end of the semester. But this is our official last lab. So try to make sure to submit it within the deadlines, because after the deadlines, all the submissions will be counted as late. And even if you get all those right, you won't be given full marks. It will be counted as a late submission. So keep that in mind. So for the ones who still haven't submitted lab 5, you have until tonight, 11:59. So please submit it within the deadline. And for lab 6, which we learned about today, you have a week. So it's 16th September, 11:59 p.m. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thank you guys for coming and learning programming and trying your best. We appreciate it. And
And please take. Oh, sorry, sir. Please take care and good luck with the rest of the semester.
yeah,
Thank you, Miss.
So I really doubt that good luck will do any good to us.
well, good luck won't, but your hard work will. So
Yeah.
make sure you work hard for it.
Okay, sir. Have a nice day,
Thank
and
you,
ma'am.
and you too.
Yeah, you too.
All right. So everyone, take care, and we hope what you've learned in this course will help you in the future. So yeah, take care and have a nice day. Stay safe.